Tennessee Titans, your reigning AFC 1 seed. Obviously, a super successful year last year, a 12-5 record, finishing first in the AFC, and outperforming, I'd say, probably a lot of people's expectations. This thing, before I even get into this team and what they gained or lost, I just want to say this is a huge credit to this coaching staff. That's going to be something I'm going to be really consistent about in this preview, is that this coaching staff is awesome. You look at what they've had to work with since they got here, Mike Vrabel and them, and the results they've gotten out of it, and it's impressive, to say the least. Also, a credit to Ryan Tannehill, who we'll talk more about specifically in the offensive preview. But the dude is just good, and I don't think enough people still realize that he knows how to play football, obviously, at a really high level. So, losses-wise, I will say this list hurts for sure if you're a Titans fan. I mean, you were talking about multiple quality players: Roger Saffold, starter; Anthony Firkser, starter; A.J. Brown, one of the best receivers in football. We'll talk about that trade. And defensively, kind of not to the same extent, but Rashaan Evans has been here for a while. Janoris Jenkins played awesome for this team. It's not easy guys necessarily to replace. Now, I do like some of the players that they brought in, especially Robert Woods. I'm a gigantic Robert Woods fan. I think he's very comfortably one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. And hopefully he's fully recovered from his injury in time for the season, so you can see that. The dude is amazing. He wins in all the ways you want a modern NFL receiver to win. Dude's so good. They also bring in Austin Hooper. Defensively, some names we'll get to, but this is a draft class. And this is another team where I don't like to talk about rookies, right? Because nobody knows how good they're going to be until they play an actual regular season game. Everybody's wrong all the time. We'll see once they step on a field, but before then, whatever. But this team is probably going to be depending on some of these guys, and that is an interesting thing to talk about because you can't just ignore it when they're going to be starters, right? But this is the offense. Let's talk about it. So, again, the first thing I want to point out is that this team is coached really, really well offensively. They do have still, I would argue, a little bit over-reliance on trying to run the ball when Derrick Henry's healthy. I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with that at this point, but it does produce some results, and as opposed to other really run-heavy teams, I think they do a good job of having second options built into their offense as far as creating plays down the field or through the air easier, as opposed to, say, like a team like the Browns or something like that. But yeah, let's talk about the guys individually, right? So this offensive line, we'll start with the run game first. I get that out of the way. More important to this team than to others, but still secondary in total. This offensive line is probably still really good. And that is a huge key to this season because most teams, right, they'll have at least one or two weak links or problems on their offensive line that really show up as you get into the season. Well, as far as starters go on this team, that's just not the case. Taylor Lewan is absolutely incredible when he plays, one of the best tackles in football. Ben Jones is incredibly underrated. I'd say very comfortably top 5 center, really, really, really good. And these other guys, Nate Davis has been a starter for a few years now, one of the best cases of development you've seen in this league where he was really bad when he started, but he's definitely not really bad anymore. Dude gets movement off the line. He's really strong. Aaron Brewer is a player I've advocated for starting since he got some spot starts at the end of 2 years ago. And when he's on the field, he produces. He's not anything amazing, but I think he's clearly a starting level NFL guard. And then Dylan Radins, now he's the big question mark here, right? But he really only played one game last year. However, that game was against Nick Bosa and the 49ers, and the dude played good, and he showed a lot of things that I'm really excited about that you can kind of pick up on early with offensive linemen, right? Now, that is still an extremely small sample size, so I'm not going to go out here and say he's going to be amazing, but some of the things that you noticed about him were he was always on his feet. He wasn't falling over. He wasn't getting pushed off balance, and that is I would say, correlates with being a good offensive lineman more than anything else that you're going to find because it's really hard to do your job when you're on your ass, right? And he was always upright. So I really like that about him. I do think there's a chance the dude's really good. There's just something about him that I kind of see. Now, that is not a guarantee for sure, and that could be an issue. But as a whole, the point is I think this team's going to be pretty good, especially in the offensive line. Of course, you still have Derrick Henry. I've been a little mean to Derrick Henry in the past on this channel because I think compared to the other super elite running backs, he does have clearer issues. But very obviously proven by his production, when he's deployed in the right way, which this team has figured out pretty much to a T, you can produce some really explosive, actual football game winning results, and that is still the case. going forward. So that's a big plus, right? This team is still going to be able to run the ball at a pretty high level, especially with the commitment they show to it. The pass game, there, I'm still more or less encouraged. So pass blocking with the offensive line, you always start in the trenches, right? Still, I'm going to guess pretty fucking good. They don't really have holes here outside of some guard play that is like not elite, but if there's literally any position you can pick to not have elite play, it's there. And it's, again, as I said, it's not like these guys are bad. They're just going to lose to, Aaron Donald. Cool. Every team deals with that. So then you're talking about a good offensive line protecting quarterback and Ryan Tannehill, who I'm going to take some time now to talk about just how good he's been since he's been with the Titans. He was good on the Dolphins before that, to be clear, too. But the dude does a lot of things that just win NFL football games, and that means that he handles being in the pocket really well, doesn't pressure into making mistakes and making game-losing turnovers, that type of thing. He consistently delivers the ball into the correct area. While he's not the most accurate, he doesn't have the most incredible arm or anything like that, he gets the ball where it's supposed to be. He lets those guys receiving the ball make plays, and he executes the offense that is coached for him at a really high level. And that just, like I said, wins NFL football games. Now, he does some stuff himself, too. He does push the ball down the field more than most of those traditional game manager, I don't like that label, but quarterback types do. He is willing to push the ball down the field. He does have mobility more than, people know he's a mobile quarterback, but that is absolutely a key part of his game, too. And the dude he does a lot of stuff that wins football games. Now, the receivers he's going to be throwing to, that part I'm definitely concerned about. I talked about Robert Woods already. He's amazing. If you're going to replace A.J. Brown, another top 10 NFL receiver, with somebody who's available this offseason, I don't think you could have done better outside of Devontae Adams. Now, we'll see, is he fully recovered from the ACL injury? It seems like most players, though, at this point, don't stay out long even when they have something serious like that. So I have pretty good faith that he's going to come back, and he's going to come back really strong because the dude just wins. He gets open very consistently. He beats even the best corners in the game. The way that he runs routes and moves, uses his body, uses like fakes, all that type of stuff to just create space for himself in an offense, whether it's coached for him or whether it's schemed for him or not. It's just elite. It's one of the best in the league. The dude is awesome. And you'll see that. He's also really good after the catch, something this team uses well. I think he'll have a really similar role to the Rams, to what he had on the Rams, which you saw worked out really well. The other guys, though, that's where we run into issues. Treylon Burks is a first-round receiver. That means just about nothing for how good he's going to be. There are a lot more good first-round rookie receivers anymore, obviously. But there's still bad ones, right? Most as recent as the Justin Jefferson, Jalen Reagor thing, right? There's no guarantee either way. Again, we'll probably know pretty quick. And if he is good, it definitely helps this offense. But honestly, I don't know how much of a difference it makes unless he is of the level of like an A.J. Brown, which history tells us that's just about impossible. But then you do have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who you have to mention because he's going to be probably the starting slot receiver for this team. He's pretty good. He does the things kind of not like Ryan Tannehill to the level, but as far as he plays within the offense, he kind of gets open. He has some shiftiness to him. He isn't going to get shut down even by good slot corners, right? He can run the routes he's supposed to, get open when he's supposed to be, and he can catch the ball, which is a useful skill set. Now, I don't love him as a playmaker, and this wide receiver group, if you do lose Robert Woods at the top, could get really bad really quick as far as just not having guys who can actively make plays, but while they do stay healthy, they do have something here. They also brought over Austin Hooper as a tight end. He's whatever as far as a helper on offense, but similar to the other guys, he plays his role well, and in a good scheme with a good offense that leads to success, which I think is the story of this offense as a whole. Another thing with this team, too, is that they're kind of like the Colts, the preview I did a couple previously, and that I'm pretty neutral on this team. What's different, though, is with the Colts, I'm neutral kind of in a bad way, where I just don't think they have the stuff to actually compete because they just aren't good enough at anything. I think this team is just good enough at a lot of things that they can compete in a lot of different scenarios. And while that doesn't guarantee wins, I do think it guarantees at the very least close games. And sometimes that's all you can ask for in the NFL. And that's kind of how I feel about this offense as well. They're not amazing at any given thing. There's ways to shut this running game down. If they lose Robert Woods, they might be fucked. As far as outside stuff goes, I think they're smart enough and just talented enough that they're going to consistently be able to move the ball to at least some degree. This does mean to be a good, really good team, though, they do have to have a really good defense. And this is the part that should be really scary if you're a Titans fan, right? So let's start with the run defense to get out of the way again. That part, I'm definitely not worried about. In fact, I actually want to talk about the scheme. This team runs one of the most interesting defensive schemes that you're going to find in the NFL. Since their decision last year to move Harold Landry, one of their more star players, off the line of scrimmage, he was drafted and played as an edge rusher for a few years. Played more of an off-ball linebacker role last year. Basically what they do, right? I think they're qualified probably technically as a 3-4, but they have the 3 down linemen, but instead of being in the traditional places, right over the center and then over the tackles, they're really, really, really heavily skewed to one side, basically playing at traditional spots of like a defensive tackle through defensive end in a 4-3. And then they have some overhang linebacker on the other side, mostly Bud Dupree. And it creates these really interesting scenarios as far as having bigger bodies in places that defenses don't expect or aren't used to. And on the other side, having faster bodies, quicker guys in places that defense doesn't expect. I think they did a really good job of it. Now, teams might figure that out going forward, which scares me a little again. But I do want to mention that just because it's cool. I like the stuff that they're doing defensively a lot as far as the X's and O's go. But it comes down to the players, right? Not the X's and O's a lot of times. And that's kind of the part we have to get over here. So do they have the talent to make a run defense work? Absolutely. Jeffrey Simmons is super, super good. The dude's really talented. He makes a lot of plays both in the pass game and in the run game. He holds the line of scrimmage, really strong. He's awesome. They have other talent too. Taylor Tart, player I liked going into last year. He proved that he can at least be consistently on an NFL field. He's nothing amazing. He's not going to be like a disruptor all the time, but he has a little bit of athleticism. And it's enough to be a useful player. Denico Autry, I'm a huge fan of. I think he works perfectly with this team as far as a guy who does just a lot of positive things and isn't just a big body to throw out there. They also bring over Deshaun Hand from the Lions. Deshaun Hand, when he's been on the field in his NFL career, I think has flashed some stuff where he could be like really, really good. He just gets hurt all the goddamn time and has been for a few years, but when he is on the field, he's shown he can play a lot of different positions at a pretty decent level. He has athleticism to beat even good offensive linemen, and he's really, really, really strong for someone his size too, which, I mean, he's really big, but he plays even bigger than that. And if he stays healthy, he's someone to look out for too. They also have Naquan Jones, a guy who played a lot towards the end of last season, who I think was awesome in that kind of overhang big fat guy defender that I was talking about. He's there too. Nobody is amazing outside of Simmons, which can be an issue, but it is what it is. So they also have good linebackers that work together in this aspect, I think. David Long, I'm a big fan of. I used to, after his first debut kind of a couple years ago, I thought he was bad because he just seemed to get overexcited and trigger at the first sign of like, oh, the ball's going this way, I'm going this way, and then he'd end up kind of being wrong sometimes and give up big plays. But another really good story of development where I think he did get over that, and now he's an aggressive downhill linebacker who makes a lot of plays, has good athleticism, and is a positive as a starter, which is awesome. They also figured out whatever the hell happened with Zach Cunningham. I think he was a Pro Bowler, a pretty high-end starter for the Texans for a few years before getting cut for presumably personal reasons, but whatever happened, good for the Titans because they figured that figured out he's like a good player. Brought him over. He was immediately a starter on their defense. Will continue to be so, and is a modern NFL linebacker I like quite a bit. And they have good edge defense too. Bud Dupree is a really good edge run defender. Harold Landry, same. So I like their run defense still for sure. The pass defense, though, we saved the worst for last. This team, and this is, I think, kind of the dirty secret with the Titans for this year, they might really suck, like really, really bad as a pass defense. Now, it's not doomed. It's more of a question, but it's a question that I'd be terrified to find out the answer for. So why is that the case? Why might they suck? Well, it starts with the pass rush, right? It's just kind of not here. Jeffrey Simmons is really good, but to be a really determinative factor from the interior as a pass rusher, you kind of have to be Aaron Donald unless you're surrounded by really good players, or at least like Chris Jones. And while Jeffrey Simmons is approaching those tiers, he is not those guys. Which means you need really good other players. Nobody else on this defensive line depth chart, the front three, is a consistent pass rusher with any meaningful ability. And their edge rushers kind of suck. Bud Dupree is almost useless as a pass rusher, which sucks to hear, especially if you give that much money to an edge rusher. But the truth is, when you watch him play, he's just a solid edge run defender, and that is almost literally it. And Harold Landry, well, he is certainly better than that, and he does offer some ability to bend the edge and some speed rush that can kind of pressure the pocket in a different way. He's not that good at it, and with their scheme, he does play mostly off the ball at this point, which means as a whole, you're just depending on blitzes and throwing kind of bullshit at the wall and hoping the quarterback gets confused, which will work sometimes, absolutely. But that's only sometimes, and most of the time those are only against bad quarterbacks. So that's scary, right? Which means to make up for it, you need an elite secondary. And realistically, that is very unlikely to happen here. Now, it's not screwed, but it is very unlikely. So Christian Fulton, number one corner, I like him a lot. He is a good player. He does his job. He has shown a little bit of the ability to make plays on the football. I like Christian Fulton. I don't like him to be, a number one elite shutdown corner, really. I don't think he quite has the athleticism for it that he shows on the field. I'm not sure how he measures out, but the other guys are the problem because you need way more than one good corner to be good in the NFL, and they might just have one because Caleb Farley basically hasn't played NFL football. And while he was a first-round pick, that's effectively meaningless now. That has no bearing on whether or not he's going to be good, really. And Roger McCreary, also a rookie, has played no NFL football. And yes, they do have two shots at finding a really good player there, which would change a lot of what I'm talking about. Depending on that is, again, you're just betting against the odds on that one. At most small experience, lesser experienced corner or secondary players in the NFL are bad the vast majority of the time. And you're leaning a lot on that stuff. And then, from the slot, too, I should have the switch. It's probably going to be Elijah Molden starting. And he, as a rookie last year, was fine as a slot corner. But he's not this, high-end playmaker or somebody's going to make up for deficiencies around the rest of the secondary. So you might be stuck there. Now, I do love their safeties. Kevin Byard is amazing. He plays deep center field really well. He experimented a lot with him last year, a lot more with him being up near the line of scrimmage and around the ball, and he still performed really well. Kevin Byard's awesome. Amani Hooker as well, finally starting for this team after sitting behind much, frankly, worse players for a couple of years. Dude's really good. He also has a real nose for the ball. He makes a lot of plays. I like those two a ton. The problem is they are still safeties, and when you're talking about a team that might really suck as a pass rushing team, exposing corners who have very, very little experience and very likely aren't high end, you can get into the territory where you're getting smoked all the time really quickly. Now, again, this is more of a question than a doom scenario because if one of those corners is good, then all of this changes pretty quick. But you are asking so much for that to be the case. And without that being a case, I'm probably going to side more with they're going to be kind of bad. And that does scare me, but I don't think they're going to be a disaster, so I will mention that. So what is the outlook for this team, right? With the schedule, I still think that despite what I was just kind of talking about with their defense, they weren't that great as a pass defense last year either, and they were still obviously the one seed in the AFC. So I expect them to be pretty good. Like I said, I have a ton of respect for this coaching staff, the way that they are aggressive as far as analytics go, going for stuff on fourth down, being just aggressive throughout the game and situational football, the scheme stuff they do, it's all really good. So with the talent that they have, and I should mention, I kind of glossed over this too, but this team has had a real knack for finding players that are second, third on their depth chart that have just kind of stepped in and been really good. Just look at their starting tackle list over the last couple of years. And some of those names came out of nowhere and ended up being good players. Dave Questenberry last year, great example of that. Which is something to remember, is that there are probably almost certainly a couple of guys that I didn't even mention in this video that are going to step in and be pretty important contributors for this team throughout the year, which could change a lot of this outlook too. So, like I said before, while I am neutral on this team, as far as I don't think they're particularly good at anything, I think they are still good enough to compete with a lot of these teams. And when you look at this schedule, I still expect them to probably win or be in extremely close coin flip games with the vast majority of these teams. I'm scared about the Bills and the Chiefs as a pass defense. Probably the Packers too, just because of Aaron Rodgers. But other than that, they're mostly fine. And none of these defenses are terrifying to the point I don't think this team can have success. So if you're the Titans, I would expect a really heart-wrenching season, however you want to call it, with full of a lot of close games. But the team is good enough that those games might go your way. So interesting season for sure. This team is good. Be excited about the future just because of their coaching staff. But as far as this year specifically, are they going to be amazing? I doubt it. You can't always get that. And that's the Titans for 2022.